Hi, I'm a member of the MFTCentral support team. This is the second part of a series covering MFTCentral. In the last video, we covered how to download, install, and start the MFTCentral application. Today, we'll be covering how to change the default admin password, how to create a new personal account and assign the necessary privileges, and how to change basic system settings necessary to begin using MFTCentral in your environment. These include changing the archive and FileBox directories. So to begin with, I'll start the MFTCentral application. This takes about 15 seconds. Next, we'll log in. Again, I'm on the same server that the application's running on, so I'm just going to go to localhost. As we covered in our last video, the default admin password is MFTCentral. This is also on the quick start guide. And we're logged in. So the first thing we want to do is go down to the system settings, go into user manager, and then we'll go into edit the admin user. The admin user is the default user that's created by the install process. And you can see here that the admin user is active. You can see when it's last logged in. And you can see that it has all the necessary privileges. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is change that password. I'm going to change it to new password. Okay, and then we'll want to do an update. So the admin password is now changed. We don't have to worry about someone else who's aware of how the install instructions and know what the default password is coming in and making changes to your system. The next thing we'd want to do as a best practice, we'd want to normally do administration as a personal account. So I'm going to go in and create a John Doe account. Assuming my name is John Doe. So here you see, obviously you enter in the username and password. You can also enter the full name, email address, and other information. You can also set the user profile. The user profile controls what passwords are acceptable. So if you want to make sure that a user has a very strong password, you can set that up as a user profile, and then if the user tries to set that their password to a password that doesn't comply with the user profile, it won't be accepted. Beneath that, you can see we've got a bunch of privileges. These privileges correspond roughly with the changes or the navigation along the left-hand side. So you can see the first option here is SFTP server control, SFTP host identity key control, and that's what you've got along the left-hand side here. SFTP server, SFTP identity, SFTP user control. So all those things, these correspond roughly with each of the options along the left-hand side. If you take that away, they won't be able to use that option, and in most cases, they won't be able to see the option either. So in this case, we're going to create the John Doe account, which has the ability to do everything admin does. We just want John Doe to log in as John Doe rather than admin so that we can see who's doing what. It's not an anonymous user effectively. So I'm going to assign them all privileges. And we're going to create that user. We'll go ahead and give the name. And we'll create the user. Okay, so that user is now created. The next thing we want to do to begin using the system is go into the settings. Now the settings are global system settings, so these are settings that are going to control how the system behaves and what it's going to do. The first option here, as you can see, is, I'm just going to make this a little bit wider. Some of these fields are quite long. The first setting here that's important is the message purge retention period. So files that go through MFTCentral, they're picked up and they're archived. So this first setting controls how long the files will sit in the archive before being deleted. The second setting here is how often we run the purge process. You can probably leave that where it is. The third and fourth options are really the most important on this page, and these control where the files will get archived when they're picked up, and also where the files will sit while they're being routed. Okay, so MFTCentral revolves around a FileBox concept, similar to you can think of it as a mailbox, where a file is picked up from another server, dropped into a FileBox or mailbox, and then it's routed from one mailbox to another, and then it's delivered. So you don't necessarily need a lot of space in the FileBox root directory, but you need space and you need to be able to write to that directory. And how much space you'll need in the FileBox root will really depend on the size of the files you're bringing in, how long they sit there, and the number of files that you're routing at one time. I would recommend at least 500 gigabytes, 500 megabytes rather, to start with. So for this, it defaults out of the box to write to temp, just so you know that's frequently normally a place on Unix that you'd be able to write to. So it'll run, but that's not where you want to keep it. So I'm going to change this to user local MFTCentral archive. And the FileBox directory we'll pick as MFTCentral FileBox. There's some other settings here that aren't terribly important. We can cover those at a later time. One other thing to show here is when you start up MFTCentral, it requires certain threads to be running to function properly. You can individually control those threads for troubleshooting purposes. Here you can see there's an HTTP server, that's for REST. There's a retry resend thread which goes out and tries to deliver files if they fail the first time. We already talked about the purge process. There's a router that moves files from the producer FileBox to the consumer FileBox. The consumer delivery thread that actually delivers the files from the consumer mailbox. Then there's a producer thread which goes out and picks up files, puts them in the producer FileBox. MFTCentral includes an SFTP server, which is covered here, and an OFTP server. So each of those can be controlled independently. In most cases, you're going to want at least these three running. Okay, you're going to want to be able to pick up files. You're going to want to be able to deliver files, and you need to be able to move files from the producer FileBox to the consumer FileBox. MFTCentral has the ability to send out emails on a start and stop when the application starts and stops. If you check these, you'll get an email, and that email will be sent to this global administrator email. So that needs to be set as well if you want to receive those emails. And to get emails, you also need to configure your SMTP server. So MFTCentral does not currently include an SMTP server, so you'll need to configure that. If you use Google or whatever your email provider is, put your credentials in here, and your server details and port and so on, and this will allow MFTCentral to send emails out. Okay. Once you make those changes, you'll want to save these, and you'll see here it tells you that you'll need to save the settings with a load save config change. So these settings are actually saved into a file, but the file isn't written until you go in and actually write them here to load save config. So we've just made changes in the settings. That's the page we're on now. We want to go into load save config. So this allows you to kind of separate making the changes and writing the changes out. Once you're confident that the changes you made you want to keep, you go here and click Save Configuration. and that those files will be saved out to a config file. We keep 10 iterations of those files, so if you want to back up and undo some of the changes you made, you can do that. Okay, that covers the basic changes you need to get started with MFTCentral. In our next video, we'll cover the SFTP server setup. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.